There we go. Okay. Always need to learn. We'll get it right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvarai. L'chaim, everybody, to life. Oh, it goes down just like water. All right. Did you ever get a gift that you couldn't use? What'd you do with it? Give it to somebody else. Gifted another, right? What's the greatest gift that we've been given? Perhaps
waking up in the morning.
When
When you say Modi Ani, then you realize, and all the body part, when you say the prayers and all your body parts work. You thank God for them working. There's no guarantee you're going to wake up.
No guarantee. Absolutely.
Sleep is what?
Correct.
1/60. Sleep is 1/60th of death.
Right. Yep. A great gift indeed. The greatest gift that we are alive. And then we're alive what? For the greatest gift that we could do another mitzvah, that we could study some more Torah, right? That we could change the world for good. So what if you've been given that, we have that gift of Torah and mitzvahs, but what if a person has a disability? And because of that disability, they're not able to engage in the study of Torah or in the doing of a mitzvah because of it. So are they gifted only part of the Torah? 4/5 of it, but maybe 1/5 not, because they can't use it? How do we understand the gift of Torah, the Torah mitzvahs, in a person's life who has disability? So let us go into this topic. Let us share the screen over here. So how are people with disabilities to connect with God? Are there parts of the Torah that cannot be used for people who have a disability? In other words, are they precluded from this area in their life? A valid question. And it's a sensitive one and a challenging one in our day and age, where disabilities are looked upon very differently today than they were 40 years ago. 40 years ago, as we will see from a letter that was written by the Rabbi to a convention of Jewish professionals who are coming together and dealing with disability, and in the name of the convention that they were coming together to work upon, they used the word to deal with mental retardation, the mentally retarded. Now, that's not a term we use anymore. 40 years later, it was a term that was used then. And the Rebbe in his letter actually says that he prefers that such a term shouldn't be used, but that they should be called exceptional. Now, and exceptional and unique. A similar term that the Rebbe used 4 years earlier in 1976 when disabled Israeli war veterans came to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe also used that term then, Mitzvah Israel, instead of the Nechei Yisrael, the disabled having a disability. So, yet the question is, Torah is given to us in its entirety, and we're meant to fulfill it in its entirety. But for someone who has a disability and cannot, does the Torah still speak to them in that area? Now, of course, you're going to see in other areas, right? But in that particular area. So let us dive into the question, and we're going to see some very broadening and beautiful ideas as the Rebbe develops in this week's Sikha. And as the Rebbe brings out and points out that these are ideas that are based in the Talmud from over 1,500 years ago, and of course, that are ultimately based in the written word of the Torah itself. And of course, where does it all begin? In this week's Parsha. And in particular, this week's Parsha, because it is Parshas Yisro-y, that this week's Parsha speaks about the revelation of the Torah and Mount Sinai. So let's get right into it. Here we have our first text. What have we here? Chaim. In the third month of the children of Israel's departure from Egypt, on this day they arrived at the Sinai desert. They journeyed from Rephidim, and they arrived in the Sinai desert, and they encamped in the desert, and Israel encamped there opposite the mountain. It came to pass on the third day, when it was morning, that there was thunderclaps and lightning flashes, and a thick cloud was upon the mountain, and the sound of the very powerful blast of the shofar, and the entire nation that was in the camp shuddered. Moshe brought the people out toward God from the camp, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain. And the entire Mount Sinai smoked, because God had descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke that is the kiln. And the entire mountain quaked violently. The sound of the shofar grew increasingly stronger. Moshe would speak, and God would answer him with a voice. God descended upon the Mount Sinai to the peak of the mountain, and God summoned Moshe to the peak of the mountain, and Moshe ascended. So Moshe went down to the people and said this to them. God spoke these words to respond. And at that point, give a clap and tish, Gabbai, when you're reading this in the Shabbos, and everybody rises, and then begins the Ten Commandments. I am the Lord your God, who took you out of bondage, took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Now, as we all are familiar, that this event, Matan Torah as it's called, has major ramifications, radically changed the world spiritually and physically. Something that we mentioned last week is that the definition of a Jew changed at Mount Sinai, that now being a Jew was fused with a soul. That is what defines you. Actually, I'm sorry, this is from Tanya, from chapters 18 and 19 that we just learned last week, right? And the effects are there forever more. Rashi explains, Vayichan Sham Yisrael, and Israel encamped there. The Hebrew word for encamped, Vayichan, is in the singular form, denoting that they were encamped there as one person with one heart, as opposed to all other encampments, that they were divided with complaints and strife, as Rashi explains. So imagine 2 million people coming together. 2 million people are going to become, Jewish through and through with a soul. 2 Jews, 3 opinions. 2 million? Oh boy, that's a lot of opinions. Yet there's no strife. They're there, stood together with one heart, one soul, with one intention, to be there to receive the Torah from God Almighty. Shoulder to shoulder, every single Jew. So now that we're all there together, what does that mean for our question that we're speaking about? We're all there to receive the entirety of the Torah. How about those with disabilities? For example, someone who cannot hear. You have to hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Or someone, God forbid, that is without an arm to put on tefillin. Are they left out of this mitzvah? If everyone received the Torah, did we receive it as a whole package, or we receive it only in piecemeal? So the Mechilta, the Medrash, tells us something very intriguing that happened then. Mechilta says, Rabbi Elazar says, to inform us the greatness of Israel. The Torah tells us that when they stood together at Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, they did not have among them any blind people, as the Torah says, and the whole nation saw, meaning bar none. The Torah tells us that they did not have among them any mutes, as it stated, and the whole nation responded as one. So there are no mutes. The Torah teaches that they did not have among them deaf people, as it says in Exodus, and all that God says, we will do and we will hear. How do we know that they did not have among them lame people? Because it states, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain, the entire people. So they weren't lame, they were able to stand. Torah teaches that they did not have among them any simpletons. As it states in Deuteronomy, you have been shown in order to know. Meaning, they knew, they had the intelligence to know. So what is this telling us? That interestingly enough, at Mount Sinai, all the disabilities at that moment disappeared. No one suffered from them. Now, how that happened miraculously or what, listen. As God said to Moshe Rabbeinu, when he complained and said, I'm not the one to bring the deliverance of the people, what did God say? And I'm sorry, with the argument that, he's kvad peh, he had a stutter, he had a challenge in communicating. So God said, who's the one that gives anybody the capability to speak or not? It is I. Don't worry. So here, God gave everybody that capability, as the Medrash tells us. But in reality, then, our question becomes stronger. That was not a long-term solution for how the Torah speaks to every single Jew after many years of the Torah being given. Today, when the Torah is still given to us as a gift. Then that there was, in a miraculous way, that all those that needed healing had the healing, it's wonderful. But how about today? If someone has a disability, do they receive the entire Torah? Did God have to do this miracle for them in order that, yes, the Torah speaks to them all? So if so, what happens today when the disability is in fact there? The miracle doesn't seem to be there at all. How do we understand this? Well, in a simple sense, we can say the answer is, yeah, it doesn't apply. As the Talmud tells us, very simply, the merciful one exempts the victim of circumstances beyond their control. So the Talmud makes a sweeping exemption. When it's no fault of yours, the mitzvah that you cannot keep, that you are forced because of things beyond your control, a disability that is not of your doing, God doesn't hold you to it. So if someone is pointing a gun to you and says, break Shabbos, right? Or if you are in the times of the Holy Temple, you're not living in Israel, Erev Pesach, where you have an obligation to bring a sacrifice, the Pesach sacrifice, you're unable to perform the mitzvah. You're no longer obligated. Something beyond your control. That's it. You're not obligated. Comes the Sholem Eshiv Rabbi Yosef Shaul Nathanson, and he says there's much precision in the Talmud's language of Rahmanna, is the Aramaic term, literally mean the merciful one, rather than the typical. It is stated the Talmud wishes to convey that the Torah is entirely merciful and that God gives mercy, and it is from this sense of compassion that the dispensation flows. Okay, so what do we have here? We all know God is all merciful, and therefore in his Rahmanis, in his compassion, God is saying you're exempt. Okay, so what do we have here? From a halachic perspective, we've answered our question. God gives us a handbook of life for the living. And in that handbook, he gives us all what we need to do. And for some, they can't do it, so they're exempt from what they're not able to do. So that is in a simple sense, a simple understanding. However, let us go deeper and understand, what does that mean exactly, exempt? Does exempt mean that they're missing out? They're exempt, but yet they're missing something? Or are they missing nothing at all because they are exempt? Is it like, in a corporation, where the accountant has a duty to work on accounting, but when it comes to marketing, it doesn't have, any obligation in marketing, doesn't have any responsibility there. So whatever goes on marketing, he's, it's irrelevant. So he doesn't have the obligation in marketing, doesn't have any of the reward from it, of the work that comes with it, because it doesn't work on it. So is that what we're to say here? So let's go a little deeper to understand this. In Kabbalistic literature, as deeply explained in Hasidus, every mitzvah represents another channel of divine energy that we introduce into this world. So like radio waves, that there's many different channels they can tune into on radio waves. So when you're doing one mitzvah, you're on one particular wave that you bring of divine energy into this world. So there's 613 broadcasting waves, divine energies that we can connect to and tune into. So what does that mean? Does it mean the person who has a disability means that particular wave, that particular divine energy that this mitzvah has, whatever it is, tefillin, hearing the shofar, as we mentioned, does that mean that they're not able to tune into that wavelength? They're not able to connect to the divine in that wavelength. And this question is made sharper in light of the measures that we find in the Tanhuma. It says the following. Rabbi Levi said, God's revelation can be compared to an image with faces on every side. If 1,000 people looked at it, it looked back at each of them individually. Similarly, when God spoke, every Jew felt that God spoke to them individually. As the verse states, I am the Lord your God, in singular form. Not Anochi Hashem Elokechem, which is plural in Hebrew, right? You don't have an English singular and plural. In French you do, but not in English, right? It says Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, personal God, as opposed to your God, plural. Because God spoke at Sinai to each and every single Jew individually. And what did he say to the individuals? He said the exact same thing, right? The Medrash is telling us that each Jew, as an individual, was given each mitzvah. But how do we understand that based on what the Talmud told us? Talmud told us that someone has a disability or is onus, is forced, at gunpoint, for example, break Shabbos, that you're exempt. So if you were given that channel, all channels were given to you, because I'm the Lord your God, to each and every Jew individually. Yet, that channel seems like I'm, because of a disability or being forced by whatever external circumstances not due to me, that I am absolved from. So it seems like I don't have a connection to that channel. So does someone, because of a disability, have a connection to that channel or not? To that mitzvah or not? To that divine connection or not? We need to understand. Are we clear so far? Okay. Yeah, I see thumbs up. Some more thumbs. Great. Okay. Beautiful. So to answer this, we're going to return to the discussion about halachic exemptions from mitzvahs. The sages in the Talmud debate whether the halachic exemption that we just spoke about, right, for people with disabilities, does it apply to a blind person or not? So let's understand the debate over here. Of course, being blind makes it a little more difficult for an individual to perform a mitzvah, but it doesn't make it impossible. So the question is, how do we see that disability? So the majority of sages agree that being blind does not disqualify the individual with a disability. That's what the majority of sages say. Rabbi Yehuda, however, disagrees. You always have to have someone, right? It's the Jewish way. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda says, ruled that the blind person was exempt from all of the laws of the Torah. Now, this is an individual opinion as opposed to the majority of opinion, right? But, it's part of Torah, and therefore we need to understand it based on its teachings, right? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, who unequivocally absolves a blind person from all mitzvahs. So the question is, what if a blind person wants to do those mitzvahs? Are they allowed to? Or put it differently, is it worth it? Would there be any purpose in doing those mitzvahs? So the Talmud shares with us an anecdotal answer. Rabbi Yosef, who was blind according to Rashi, said that when I heard that someone ruled in accordance to Rabbi Yehuda, right, that Rabbi Yehuda says you're absolved, that the blind person is absolved from mitzvahs, who said that the blind people are exempt from mitzvahs, I declared a festive day for the sages. Why? because I am not commanded to do the mitzvahs, and yet I do them nonetheless. So Rabbi Yosef was happy about the fact that he was given a unique opportunity to practice Judaism, not just because he was commanded to do so, but he's doing it on his own volition, his own conviction. So Rabbi Yosef answers the first part of our question very clearly. Yes, a person with a disability can perform a mitzvah if they so wish. But is there any purpose in it? So let's continue in the Talmud over there. Continue in the Talmud. Now that I've heard Rabbi Hanina's statement, Rabbi Yosef continued that one who is commanded to do the mitzvah has a greater reward than one who is not commanded to do the mitzvahs. So I declare a festive day for the sages whenever I hear someone rule that the law is in accordance to Rav Yehuda. Why? Because as one who is commanded, I have a greater reward. So let's go through this to understand what Rabbi Yosef's thought process is. Initially, he was under the impression that performing beyond the letter of the law, right, is preferred. You know, there are situations you might not be required to do the mitzvah, but if you choose to do it and actually do the mitzvah, that you've gone beyond the duty, which earns you a greater reward. So Rabbi Yosef therefore concluded that inasmuch as his mitzvah's performance were beyond the letter of the law, he deserved a greater reward. That's how he initially understood. Now, he learned that that logic was incorrect, and therefore he reversed himself. Right? Because Reb Hanina argued that one receives a greater reward when they are obligated to do something. So he reversed the logic, right? That is the fact that it's a greater reward when you're obliged. Yet the fact remains, the credit is still due to the one who is not obligated. He still got credit. So, yes, when you're obligated, you get a greater reward, but that doesn't mean the one who's exempt deserves nothing. Maybe, so it's less, but he gets a reward. So we've answered our second question. Even according to the opinion, the one who is blind is exempt from mitzvahs, there is a reward for when they do it anyways. A blind person's mitzvah is worthy. That's what comes out of this. Now, we know Rabbi Yosef. Let's tie him in this piece of Talmud to our discussion in the Parsha, the giving of the Torah. And the Talmud tells us that Rabbi Yosef's Shavuos celebration. That was in the Talmud in Baba Kama. Now we go to the Talmud in Psachim, Pesach. Even though he's going to speak about the holiday Shavuos, but it's in the tractate of Psachim. On the holiday Shavuos, Rabbi Yosef said, "Prepare for me a choice third-born calf." In explanation, he continued, "For without the holiday Shavuos, how many Yosefs would there be in the market? Famous line. Famous piece of Talmud. Rashi explains Rav Yosef's enthusiasm for this particular holiday of Shavuos. Rav Yosef means to say, I studied Torah and became great. There are many people in the markets named Yosef. And aside from the Torah I studied, there is nothing to differentiate between me and them. So what's his great excitement about the holiday of Shavuos? it stems from the fact that without Torah, he would not have become great. So what does it mean exactly? Like, it sounds a bit superficial, if not even conceited. What kind of Torah scholar goes around proclaiming his greatness? I studied Torah and became great. I would be just like a regular Joe in the street, in the marketplace, if it wasn't for the Torah that I studied. But based on what we learned previously, we tie the two things together, we see something very profound that teaches us about disability. He spent, Rabbi Yosef, much of his life thinking that the halach is in accordance to Rabbi Yehuda, that a blind person, like himself, who was blind, was exempt from all mitzvahs, yet he still performed them and deserved great merit. Without Torah, he would be any blind Joe in the street. With his appreciation for Torah, he was doing incredible godly things despite his disability. So, bearing the lesson from the Rabbi Yosef, you can see that the logic doesn't only apply to blind people. With regard to reward, there's no differentiation between different people being exempt. So what we learn from Rabbi Yosef to other disabilities, both physical and cognitive, that there is the reward for their engagement, even though they are exempt. And what a reward means, we'll define. So don't, but that's not what's important right now. What's important is what we're learning here from Rabbi Yosef, that I studied Torah and became great, and even though I was exempt, I had great reward. So the Rebbe writes as following in a letter that I mentioned to you earlier, that was to the Conference of Jewish Community on the issue of the needs of the Jewish retarded. That was what the conference was called. So I mentioned earlier that the Rebbe said that he prefers that they should be called mitziyanim, special people, and not as a euphemism, but to accurately describe those that had a limitation, a mental capacity that was limited, and meaning that they couldn't absorb information as a regular person does, but in other areas that they are quite normal and at times even above average, if not very unique. So let's see this teachings here. Okay, everybody with me? The actual practice of mitzvahs in everyday life provides a tangible way by which these special people, see how the Rebbe calls them here, of all ages can, despite their handicap, identify with their families and with other fellow Jews in their surroundings and generally keep in touch with reality. Even if mentally they may not fully grasp the meaning of these rituals, subconsciously they are bound to feel at home in such an environment, and in many cases could participate in such activities also on a conscious level. To cite one striking example from actual experience during the festival of Sukkot this year, as is well known, Lubavitch activists on this occasion reach out to many Jews with lulav and esrog, bringing them the spirit of the season of our rejoicing, Zman Simchasenu. This year being the year of Hakel, the year of gathering following the sabbatical year, I urge my followers to extend these activities as much as possible to include also nursing homes and senior citizens hotels, as well as other institutions. I was asked what should be the attitude and the approach to persons who are senile or confused. So I replied, all the more reason to reach out to them with this tangible way, right, of a physical act of a mitzvah. Well, the reports were profoundly gratifying. Doctors and nurses were astonished to see such transformation. Persons who had spent countless days in silent immobility, deeply depressed and oblivious to everything around them, the moment they saw a young man walk in with a lulav and esrog in his hand, suddenly displayed a lively interest, eagerly transformed the preferred mitzvah objects, some of them reciting the blessings from memory without prompting. The joy in their hearts shone through their faces, which had not known a smile all too long. Wow, how beautiful. The Rebbe is sending followers to nursing homes where these people have cognitive disabilities, who may be, in fact, even exempt from the mitzvah. So then why bother with them? Why is that important? The Rebbe says it's absolutely important. They need the encouragement, perhaps more so than others. Why? So let's follow Rav Yosef's lesson. Just because they are exempt doesn't mean that they should feel disconnected. We should not allow them to feel disconnected. In the Rebbe's letter, he describes the psychological and physical benefits that are given when the people in the nursing homes, the residents there, are given the opportunity to do mitzvahs. Physical benefits and certainly spiritual benefits, because they're able to access the godly broadcast, that channel that might be seemingly somewhat defunct, but it's not. It's not defunct. So this now we answer our question in section 1, at least in part. Just because one is exempt, because that channel they don't need to open up, doesn't mean they're denied access. If they choose to plug into it, into that channel, into the godliness of that mitzvah, it's available to them, even those with disabilities. Now, this sounds to maybe like a nice theory, right? That a senile person in an old age home is capable, at least, to bring a smile on their face. Or someone who's, is incapacitated, that they can't put on tefillin because they are missing an arm or they can't hear, they can do a shofar. So it sounds good that, you bring some spiritual feeling of connectivity. But are they getting the divine energy that is in that mitzvah? Or is it just, listen, we got to take care of the elderly and kind of make them feel, feel good inside, let their neshama shine. They have, as the Rebbe writes in the letter, not known a smile all too long. So let's do that for them. But is the channel open? Are they making the direct connection with God Almighty? Are they actually impacting? Or are they just being impacted? My question clear? Yes? All right. So the answer is in what it means credit. What does it mean that you get reward for a mitzvah? Like you keep Shabbos, you give tzedakah, you daven. So what does it mean? God puts it in his notebook. You davened it today so nicely. Check mark, 2 check marks for you. half a check mark for another one, right? You gave tzedakah in an abundant way with a smile on your face. 3 check marks for that. So how do we understand the credit? How do we understand the reward? So the Talmud gives us a situation where God considers it if you've performed the mitzvah, when you actually didn't even do the mitzvah. Now we turn to the Talmud and Sanhedrin. By the end of tonight's class, you're going to be all scholars in all areas of the Talmud. Baba Kama, Psachim. Now we're going to Sanhedrin. Rabbi said, someone who brings his fellow to do a mitzvah is considered to have done the mitzvah himself. This is learned from the verse that states, and the stick that Moshe used to strike the river, as it says in Shmois, did Moshe strike the river? Aaron struck the river, right, by the first 2 plagues. Rather, the verse teaches us that one who brings another person to do the mitzvah is considered to have done the mitzvah on their own. So when you help another person to do a mitzvah, God considers as if you've done the mitzvah. So if you teach someone how to keep Shabbos, right, it's considered as if you kept Shabbos. If you encourage someone to give tzedakah, it's considered as if you gave the tzedakah. You help someone to learn how to daven, put on their tefillin, say the Shema, like you davened. So what does it mean? What does it mean credit? How do you get the credit without actual performance? I mean, maybe again, maybe a credit in you know, that God will be what? You know, benevolent to you, kind to you, doing wonderful things. No. That's not what it means. But yet, you didn't do the mitzvah, so what do we mean? What are you getting? Some kind of, what are you getting from this? So we learn in Tanya, we'll come up to soon, what is the reward for a mitzvah? What in fact is the reward? What is the credit that you get? Says the Alter Rebbe in chapter 37 of Tanya, the mitzvah creates its own reward. How so? By performing the mitzvah, a person draws down godly energy from above to be integrated into the physicality of this world in an object which had heretofore been under the dominion of evil, of klipa, and had received its vitality from evil, from this klipa. So, you know, I mean, many of you, Baruch Hashem, come to learn Tanya every day, and you know that a mitzvah is not merely the do's and don'ts. It's not this long list of 613 do's and don'ts that we got to check off, and God's giving us a reward for the things that we do, and God forbid for the things that we don't, that, you know, in the world to come. But actually, far deeper, as we know, is that we're literally changing the world. So, for example, when you take tefillin, you're taking the you know, the hide of an animal, of a cow, and you're taking that physical thing, putting it on your arm, on your head, you're making a bracha, saying the Shema. What are you doing? You're actually bringing holiness into the physical reality of this world. You're elevating the klipas noiga, the admixture of good and evil that was in this mundane material object, and you're taking the good that's out of there and elevating it to holiness, right? Something we're fully aware of. And that's the reward of the mitzvah, that you're making an extraordinary impact in the physical world with the act of the mitzvah. Like a doctor, you know, think about what's the most rewarding thing for a doctor. They have a patient that's not well. An oncologist has someone who's, God forbid, has machla. What's the greatest reward that they can have? Is helping to heal that person, to make an impact in their life, that they brought them health. Is that clear? The act of helping that person to change their physical reality. So here, a mitzvah is by changing the physical reality of this world, that you're connecting it to its source in godliness. So from this perspective, a disabled Jew who facilitates another Jew in mitzvah observance gets, so to speak, the spiritual credit. What's the spiritual credit? In other words, the impact itself. That's the credit. Because they're the one who facilitated that there should be this impact. So it's not so much about who performs the mitzvah, what we're saying. It's the fact that the mitzvah was done. That's what's relevant. Because what does the mitzvah do? It draws godliness into this world. It changes the world for good. You made an impact. So if you've engineered the impact because you've helped another person or many people to do a mitzvah, and because of that they made an impact in this world, wow, amazing. That's beautiful. So a disabled person, then it comes out, who might not be able to do this mitzvah, a particular mitzvah, putting on tefillin, but the benefit of putting on tefillin, the impact it makes in this world, if they encourage others to do tefillin, right? Then they're responsible for that impact that was made in this world of those people that they inspired. This all happened at Matan Torah, at the giving of the Torah. In other words, before the giving of the Torah, we had great, patriarchs and matriarchs, right? Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, whoa, they're much, much holier than we are. They are holier themselves than we will ever be. They are chariots to the divine, completely nullified to the divine, yet their impact in the physical world they couldn't make, because it was a decree before the giving of the Torah that the spiritual remains spiritual, heavenly is heavenly, and earthly is earthly, mundane is mundane. And therefore, you cannot fuse the two together. You cannot bring bring godliness into this world and elevate the mundane world. That transformational power came to us in Matan Torah on the holiday of Shavuos. As the Rabbi explains in this week's Sicha, Chassidus explains that the mitzvahs our forefathers performed were exclusively spiritual experiences in loftier worlds. So they're much loftier souls than we are, rather. But their impact's not the same. When the Torah was given at Sinai, the edict that the heavenly and the physical realms remain separate was abolished. And then the heavens descended to earth. At that point, we're given the ability to manifest spiritual, godly energy into the physical world and to thereby infuse holiness into physical objects. Again, before the giving of the Torah, strict guidelines. Spiritually remain spiritual. Heavenly is in heaven. And the physical is down here, is mundane. Matan Torah, that was all abolished. Godliness could now be infused in the physical world. But this is something that is a Jewish thing, period. The rest of the world didn't get the memo. Hence, you see the rest of the world, what are they trying to do? They want to be godly. They're going to be a heavenly person, right? They won't get married because that's really mundane, really earthly, right? They're going to be live on top of a Tibet mountain, gazing forever. Their navel. Why? Because this is exclusively an idea that was given to the Jewish people that they can impact the physical reality of the world, not just the spiritual reality of the world, through the physical act of a mitzvah. Now, with this, we can understand the true meaning of Rabbi Yosef's proclamation that was so exuberant, so enthusiastic. If not for this day, how many Yosefs are there in the market? If it was not for this day called Matan Torah, right, where I was given the ability, where the Jewish people were given the ability that they could transform the mundane world into a place that is channeled with the godly energy of bringing divine energy and transforming the physical world through an observance, right? Then where would I be? I'd just be another guy I'd just be someone else in the marketplace, like everybody else. In other words, even me with my disability, I'd fall short because I could not channel divine energy into this world because I'm disabled. Right? Because if the mitzvah is spiritual, I have no, but Matan Torah changed all of that. Access was granted. Any person, even if they're unable to do a certain mitzvah, they can still transform the physical world. You can't do the mitzvah, doesn't mean you can't transform the world. Yes, you can. So Rabbi Yosef is bringing this idea home, not just by teaching it, but living it. Who was Rabbi Yosef? It's a little background about him. He lived in the Talmudic era. He lived in the yeshiva in Babylonia, where there was the famed yeshiva called Pompadisa. Many Talmudic scholars there. As a matter of fact, Yosef just wasn't one of the scholars. He was of the foremost scholars. He was comparable to Sinai. Now, on a simple level, he was compared to Sinai because they called him Sinai. That's what they called him. Why? Because whatever he taught, he could be connected to Sinai. He didn't lose anything. Whatever was at Sinai, he maintained it. Whatever was given there, he got it. Now, there was another foremost scholar at the time. His name was Rabbi. He had great logical powers. He had breadth of knowledge, but he was more about delving into a specific topic, plummeting it to its depths. And the scholars called him Oika Harim. He could move mountains. So Rabbi Yosef is called Sinai, the mountain. And he could move the mountain. Now, the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva, passed away in Pompadisa. And there were two candidates that they had to replace the head of the yeshiva, to be the new Rosh Yeshiva. And they were unsure who would be better, Sinai or moving Sinai, right? Moving mountains. In other words, there's two methodologies here. There's a methodology of maintaining and being like a mountain that you are there and you maintain it all. Just what you were given is you maintain it. Or is it better that you could not just maintain the knowledge that you're given, but you can move mountains because you can plummet the depths? What's preferred? So they sent to the scholars in Israel and they asked them. I told you tonight we're going to become Talmudic scholars because now we're going to another piece of Talmud, another tractate, Hurrius. The Gemara says there, Rabbi Yochanan said there was a matter of dispute between Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and the other sages. One said that the scholar who was comparable to Sinai, who was at Rabbi Yosef, are disabled, right? Individuals blind, is that the knowledge has the breadth of the whole Torah is preferable, right? Sinai, formidable mountain, it is holding on to all of its knowledge, the breadth of the knowledge, that's preferable. While the other side said that the scholar who can move mountains with his logic is preferable. In other words, deep logic, take apart things. Rabbi Yosef was a scholar comparable to Sinai, while Rabbi was a scholar that was able to move mountains with his logic. The scholars of Babylon asked the scholars of Israel, which of the scholars has precedence? The scholars in Israel replied, a scholar comparable to Sinai takes precedence, for the master said everyone needs access to the source. Wow. So with great logic, Rabbi, who could find insights, deep insights, was not preferable by the scholars of Israel, when it comes to appointing a leader, that's what is not most needed. What's needed is a scholar with all the necessary knowledge to help the people perform the entire Torah. So let's go back now to Rabbi Yosef's statement. How many Yosefs, how many Joes are there in the market? And let's ask one more question on this. Why does he say how many Yosefs are there in the market instead of how many people are there in the market that if they didn't have Torah, they'd just be just another, human in the street, right? A non-Jew. Just, a regular human. Why does it say that? Why does it contrast with his own name? So the Rebbe explains. The Rebbe says, all people have the need of Rabbi Yosef's Torah, and everyone live their lives according to his rulings and teachings. This includes those who were commanded to do mitzvahs and were thus able to do mitzvahs in a manner that completely transformed the material world. It was through this achievement that Rabbi Yosef became great. Through this achievement, Rabbi Yosef transformed the material world. This is why Rabbi Yosef uses the language. Through the new quality added to the world at Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, the ability to alter the physical world with mitzvahs, or God forbid, the opposite, Rabbi Yosef, as the Sinai of his generation, brought about change in the physical world, despite the fact that he was blind and therefore not commanded to perform mitzvahs. So he is the source of everyone else's knowledge because he's the leader of the generation. He's the head of the yeshiva. So he's the source of everybody else's knowledge. Rabbi Yosef has a part in everyone's mitzvahs. And through this, he accesses the godly channel that a blind person who was not commanded to perform. And this is how we access the channels that appear to be restricted. We act like Rabbi Yosef. We look at those parts of the Torah that we may not be commanded to observe. We might not be able to observe them. And we say, what can we do? How can we teach it? How can we encourage others to do it? How can we impact the world through this mitzvah? When we engage in that teachings and help others with it, then that mitzvah becomes ours. Because of them, and because of us, they did the mitzvah. They did the mitzvah. So this is what Rabbi Yosef is saying. Great is his Torah, meaning his Torah learning, because of it, of that knowledge, he was able to impart to everybody else that the knowledge that he had to help them with their mitzvah. And then therefore with their mitzvah, he has a part of that mitzvah. What does it mean to have a part of that mitzvah? He has that channel that might have been closed to him because of his restriction, being that he is not obligated in it, right? He's not obligated in that mitzvah, right? Of course, if he's obligated in it, then he has the open channel. But we're going here according to, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, right? That the blind person isn't, and therefore he has that channel closed. But because he was the teacher of the generation, and therefore he helped people with their mitzvah, even though he didn't need to do the mitzvah, but he opened up the channel for other people to do the mitzvah, and the mitzvah was done. What's important over here is not that you do the mitzvah, but through you, the mitzvah is accomplished. What does that mean? Through you, the impact of transforming the world has been achieved. So if you inspired people to do, then you've brought that godly channel, opened up that godly channel for that person, and they have, through their mitzvah, achieved the impact of the world of transforming the physical world of that physical object by elevating it and bringing godliness into this world. Beautiful idea, which is when you think about it, how noble that is, that the mitzvah is not about you and your achievement, but that it is achieved, godliness brought into this world. Let's conclude the lesson by sharing a conversation that the Rebbe had with a parent who had a child that was severely autistic. Okay. After introducing his wife and younger son and receiving the Rebbe's blessing for them, Cantor Malovny asked for a blessing for his older son, Zevi. We have another son who unfortunately is not well. He is autistic. He needs a blessing. The Rebbe responds by lovingly offering that although autistic people might experience challenges in interpersonal relationships, they can relate very closely to God. While they're not busy with people, they're busy with God, the Rebbe says. Those are his words. The Rebbe suggests that Zevi has a deep spiritual and Jewish connection, a connection that ought to be nurtured. This rings true. Zevi has, after all, responded well to Jewish practices in the past. Cantor Malovny tells the Rebbe that Zevi has expressed excitement when he's being taught to recite a blessing over food, and he treasures his tzitzis. Does he have a tzedakah box in his room? The Rebbe asked. No, you can put one in there. The facility won't mind. Charity is something everyone allows. It will benefit him, and when people visit him, he will remind them that they must give charity. So the Rebbe looked at this person who has, a severe disability, and he did not see the impaired connection with God. No, the Rebbe saw someone who's special connection with God. The Rebbe didn't see a person who couldn't and shouldn't do mitzvahs because he's exempt. On the contrary, do mitzvahs. Whatever he can do, he must do. So, and not only that, through him, he will impact others by having a tzedakah box. Not only he will do the mitzvah, but others will see, and he will influence others to do the mitzvah. So this is really what it means. The impact that we make on others, that they do good, that they do another mitzvah, right? That a mitzvah is not a chore that we have to do, but we do it in order to get the reward, right? You got to clean up your room as a child in order that you're going to get, the ice cream cone or whatever it is. No, that's not what a mitzvah is, as we know from learning Tanya very well. It's about bringing divine energy into this world and changing the world, making an impact. That impact doesn't necessarily mean I have to make the impact through my actual observance of a mitzvah. When I'm obliged to do it, I got to put on the tefillin. So of course I'm obliged to do the mitzvah. If I'm obliged to give tzedakah, I'm obliged to do it. But if I'm not obliged, someone who's severely autistic is not obliged. But that doesn't mean they're not special. They are special. How? Because they can open up the channel and have the mitzvah done. Not because they did the mitzvah, maybe they did, but they can inspire others. And by them inspiring others, what have they done? They've made a real impact in this world, because that's what a mitzvah is all about. Before the Torah was given, it was not about making an impact in this world. It's about removing yourself from this world to be more spiritual, connected to the divine. Torah is given in this week's Parsha to make the impact in this world. Someone with a disability may actually make a greater impact than someone who doesn't have that disability, because they can inspire. They can inspire. And that's what we're here, inspire another to do a mitzvah. We all have disabilities. They may not be the ones that are put us into a box and give us a label. Okay, fine. But so maybe we're not so good at this. But you know what? Okay, help others to be good at it. L'chaim. L'chaim. Thank you. Any questions? Phenomenal teaching. By the way, those are on Facebook. Next week, I hope that this class will be on YouTube, on Tanya Rabbi YouTube station instead of on Facebook. I mean, it might, primarily to be there. Just we couldn't figure it out this. I couldn't figure it out this week. My disability. I'm not techie. Ay. Yeah. All right, folks. Thank you very much. I see there are many things in the chat.
You're techie enough to inspire all of us to be doing what we're doing. It's through tech that we found you.
You're right. You're right. Okay. Well, you know what? Because of my lack, so now I am engaging everybody here that you got to bring another friend to come and learn, because obviously I didn't manage that right now.
I try every day. I tell everyone.
All right, beautiful. By the way, you know what? If you don't get it live, I'll always send them to the YouTube station or to TanyaRabbi.com or to YouTube Tanya Rabbi. Good Tavach, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Be well.
You too. Thank you.
Rabbi, thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Be well.